What's up, Falcons fans, and welcome to episode 7 of Talking Birdie, an Atlanta Falcons podcast, powered by sportstalkatl.com. I am your host, Matt Karoly. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Karoly, Karoly spelled Karoly. I'm joined as usual by my two co-hosts from the Sports Talk ATL team, Jake Gordon, Alex Lord, and tonight we are joined by a very special guest. You know him as the host of Locked On Falcons. I know him as my arch nemesis on Falcons Twitter. He is Aaron Freeman. Aaron, thanks for taking the time out to join us. Probably know the answer to this question given the circumstances, but how you doing right now?
I'm doing great, and I'm glad you got me on here, Matt, because the Bald Brotherhood has to represent on this podcast, and I'm sure you're not getting enough love.
That's right.
For the baldness.
Yeah. These two guys with their handsome, good looks and great hair. Yep, I definitely feel in the minority more shows than not. So it's good to have you back. It's good to be with you again. Jake, Alex, how you guys doing tonight?
You go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I'm good. I busted up my knee actually over Memorial Day weekend, so that's how I've been hobbling around, just being pitiful. I've been feeling sorry for myself, really.
Well, thanks for toughing it out for us, Jake. What's going on, man?
It's just like going through a breakup, really. You just kind of start to. We're with life without Julio at this point, so just kind of moving on. Hopefully. I'm just kind of hoping something bigger happens in the NFL, like we get a trade with, maybe Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers, and it kind of pushes that to the back burner. But for now, it's still front and center, and still something to think about a lot.
Yeah, it definitely hurts. I mean, we knew this day was going to come. We've been speculating about it for a couple of weeks, and unfortunately, it's not a bad nightmare. It's real, and the Falcons made it official on Sunday morning when they traded arguably the greatest player in Falcons history to date, Julio Jones, to the Tennessee Titans. And I think before we get into the compensation aspect of it, which is where I want to start the show, I think it's important to clarify again, because some people still, I think, are confused on why we're here, why the Falcons are here, why Julio was traded. When the report first surfaced in the end of April, leading up to the draft, it was speculated and reported to be a salary cap dump move. The Falcons, find themselves in a tough salary cap position. And so that's how this whole situation was framed initially. But as more information came to light, thanks to Shannon Sharp, on a live recording of Fox Sports 1's Undisputed and an impromptu phone call with Julio, it became apparent that Julio no longer wanted to be in Atlanta. As tough as that is to say, that's the truth of the matter. This was more than just a salary cap issue. The Falcons had other means to create salary cap space, to sign their draft class, to have an emergency fund, to maybe add another free agent or two, namely restructuring Grady Jarrett's contract. But ultimately, they didn't have to do that because they pulled the trigger on this Julio Jones trade. He wanted out. So again, I think that's worth clarifying. This said nothing. I don't believe the Falcons wanted to trade Julio Jones, but they respected his decision. He's meant so much to the organization, and so they gave in to his demands. And that's where we are today. The Falcons will be getting a second-round pick in 2022 and a 2023 fourth-round pick for Julio Jones. And in addition, they're sending back a 2023 sixth-round pick. So if we look at it in totality, if we place a present value on the deal, it's important to remember the rule of thumb in the NFL. Future draft picks are usually valued around less than current year picks. So the 2023 fourth-round pick is the equivalent of a 2022 fifth-round pick. And then the sixth-round pick that the Falcons are sending in 2023 is worth a seventh-round pick in 2022. So putting the fifth against the seventh, Julio Jones was essentially dealt for a 2022 second and a 2022 sixth-round pick. So, a little more than what the Mohamed Sanu deal, which has gotten brought up quite a bit in this conversation, and rather unfairly, because, again, if you look at that deal, it was way over market value. Thomas Dimitroff fleeced Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots for Mohamed Sanu. So it's not fair to put the two side by side. People are going to naturally do so. But I think when you look at Julio Jones, the age definitely played a part in this. The recent injury history played a part. There is some uncertainty, despite Julio's previous 4 or 5 years, playing 14 plus games each year. But Aaron, I want to toss it over to you. What are your thoughts on the compensation and the value that the Falcons got in return for Julio?
I have 2 thoughts. They got what I thought they would get. When people asked me on Locked On Falcons back in like December and stuff, when we first started hearing chatter about giving the Falcons poor 2020, is there a chance that Julio Jones and Matt Ryan would not be back with the team, in 2021? I was asked sort of what my thoughts on the compensation would be, and I basically said, you're probably not going to get more than what the Texans got for DeAndre Hopkins. You look back at the T.O. trade that didn't happen back in 2004, where he was supposed to get traded to the Ravens, but he balked at that and wound up, I forgot the exact mechanism, but wound up going to Philadelphia. But they basically traded him for a second round pick, and he was like 31, 30, around that age. So the expectation for me was like, you were probably going to get a second round pick plus. Obviously, for me, like, even though that's what the market dictated, I feel like the on-field value that Julio gives you is worth way more than that, just because, that second round pick is not nothing, but you got like maybe like a 50-50 shot of that turning into a halfway decent player for you, 2-3 years down the road. And obviously the value that Julio would potentially bring to your football team in the short term is going to outweigh what that long-term value is with that draft pick. So it's one of those things where like I get is the best offer. I'm not surprised that the Falcons didn't get more than that. That was the expectation that I had all along, that they would get that. When we heard the buzz that they were, there was talks of a first round pick, I was very surprised by that. I was like, wow, there's really no chance. I think the other factor that you got to factor in is the timing. Teams are not going to be as willing to give up value after the draft, right? Teams don't have cap space. So that's one of the reasons why less teams seem to be involved in this situation, because they don't have as much cap space as they would have had if we had facilitated this trade back in March. And, I think that has some lessons to be learned when you hear people talk about Matt Ryan's future and talking about, ways if the Falcons wanted to get out of his contract, and talking about a post June 1 trade. And I think this Julio situation tells you that you're not going to get top value if that is a direction that the Falcons at some point, whether it's 2022 or down the road, particularly try to explore, where, it's better to trade him sooner rather than later. So those are my general thoughts.
Jake, anything you want to add about the compensation? How did you feel about the deal that they ultimately received?
Well, I'll let Alex speak on his own article, but he basically wrote about how it was fair compensation, and I replied to it, and I said, is it fair? Yeah. Is it satisfying? No, not really. Obviously, I mean, even if you traded Julio Jones for a first-round pick, you're still going to be like, this sucks. But all the reports were coming out that there was never an offer for a first-round pick, which, I could understand them trying to drum up interest and drive their own market. But that's just the way it goes. Luckily for me, usually when the draft time rolls around, I love like 8 players in the second round. So I guess if you want to look at a glass half full. But other than that, it's hard to call it disappointing. Like Aaron said, it's kind of what you expected. If you got a first round pick, everybody was saying they would be very surprised. Like, I mean, almost everybody in the media. So, hey, they got what they got. His contract will be off the books. Next year's dead cap hit is going to be really terrible, but I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute.
Alex, talk a little bit about your article.
Yeah, so basically what I commented on was I was directing it at fans who are basically equating, like you're saying, just a second round pick, when Sanu just got traded for a second round pick. But they don't understand the reality of trading a player who's 32 years old, owed $38 million over 3 years. He just missed 7 games. He doesn't practice much. So, like, Tennessee could be geniuses by the end of the year. This could turn out very well for them. But this trade isn't without financial risk. I mean, they absorbed all of his contract, and there is an out next year that's really nice for them, but they're still on the hook this year. They had to restructure Ryan Tannehill's contract quite a bit. So they are full-fledged, win-now mode. So when I think it's fair trade also. What Aaron, he brought up the D-Hop trade. It was about a second-round pick and some change and a couple players exchanged. But DeAndre Hopkins was 27 at that time. 27. I mean, that's a big difference. And Randy Moss, when he got traded for a fourth-round pick, he was 32. I mean, for a 32-year-old wide receiver, it's not bad compensation. It is Julio Jones. So I don't want to just, offend a bunch of people by just saying he's some bum. Julio's arguably one of the greatest receivers of all time. But just at this point in time, the Falcons didn't have leverage. The difference was Sanu was, surplus, and the Patriots were desperate. So that's how that turned out. Whereas, now, that's not how the things are. I think given the circumstances of what the Falcons are going through, and then Julio Jones basically ousting himself from the organization, this is about realistic compensation, I think. Especially the fact that they took all of the $15.3 million. I think that's a big thing that, that should be considered a win.
Yeah, that was huge. I mean, that was the one thing that I needed to see happen was, Jake brought up they're already going to suffer a $15 million dead cap hit in 2022. I mean, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. So to add anything more to that would have been downright tragic. So to get the contract to no longer foot any more of the bill was a win. I was a little disappointed. I'm curious, Aaron, did you think a player would have ever been another player would have been involved in a deal? I mean, what were your expectations? I know you thought this deal came in how you saw it, but a lot of people speculated maybe another player would come in return, and that could help offset some of the salary that the team acquiring Julio would have gotten. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it certainly was something, on the table. When people would ask me, proposing different teams, different landing points, and if you were to create a trade with the Raiders or with the Titans or whatever the case may be, and what player would you want? I always looked at other teams' rosters and I was just like, nobody interested me. All the good players, if we were going to trade with the Titans, give me Jeffrey Simmons, but there was no chance that they were going to trade you Jeffrey Simmons. Anybody good, they wouldn't necessarily trade. And you would still get the sort of the maximum value in terms of draft capital. If you would probably have to give them a second round pick in order to trade Julio and get Jeffrey Simmons back. So for me, it was one of those things where it was definitely something that I was interested in to see if the Falcons could get a player right away that could give them some on-field value, whether it's offense or defense in this trade. But for me, given the likely options that they could have gotten, it probably wouldn't have really moved the needle in any major way for me personally. It just would have been okay, you got something back. You got some value on the field. You probably got a guy that's a 1-year rental that you can kick the tires on and give you competent, play this upcoming season as a potential starter. And then you kind of let him walk in free agency for a comp pick or something like that. And that's what you get out of it. But, it was never a situation where I felt like the Falcons had to come away with a player because there just wasn't really anybody, to me, at least worth a damn.
I mean, I'm reminded Michael Rothstein, the ESPN beat writer for the Falcons, he had suggested a trade with the Titans, or maybe it was a trade from the Titans ESPN writer that was proposed to him. It was a third-round pick and Rashaan Evans for Julio Jones. How would and I'll toss this to you, Jake, first. How would you compare that trade to what the Falcons ultimately got? Would that have been a better trade, you think, than the second?
Off the top of my head, Evans is a free agent this offseason, right? Is he a second-round pick?
So like Aaron put it, it's like a rental you're getting.
Would have been the same with Harold Landry, who was a guy that got brought up a lot. I think I brought him up a time or two, which, then you just, you're kind of digging yourself a deeper hole because now next offseason, if Harold Landry goes out and gets, 8-9 sacks, you're going to pay him. He's probably going to want big money as an edge rusher, potentially if he has a good season. Rashaan Evans, I mean, he's a Mike linebacker. They're not super difficult to come by. Maybe if it was Evans in a third, because if he does walk, maybe you can get a third round compensation pick. That's kind of stretching it. I think they only give out a few of those a year, if any. So I'd probably just stick with what they got, the second and the fourth, since the condition on the fourth is that. Well, we can get into that later.
Well, no, that's a good point. I guess I forgot to mention that it came out today on the transaction wire that the condition on the 4th round pick is if the Titans have a compensatory pick in 2023, then the Falcons are going to receive the compensatory pick. And if they don't have a comp pick, then they're going to get the original 4th round pick. When I first saw it, I got worried that the 4th might get bumped down to a 5th or a 6th, but that's not as big of a deal. I mean, we don't know what the 2023 comp picks are going to look like until next offseason. And I guess at the very worst, we might be talking about a 20-pick swing if the Titans don't make the playoffs after the 2022 season. But it's not all bad. I mean, certainly it complicates matters and I guess does devalue the compensation, but.
I will say
much worse.
Yeah, looked. Obviously, it's too early for this because they'll sign 100 free agents between now and then. But as of right now, I think the only names that I saw that really could possibly fetch a compensation pick, unless somebody comes out and balls out. Like I said, it's way too early. AJ Brown, who they're 100,000% not going to lose. Right. Jeffrey Simmons, who they're also 100,000% not going to lose, and Roger Saffold. So. As of right now, it looks good. But obviously,
and Evans, right? I guess Evans could be that guy if he's an unrestricted free agent, and if they let him walk, right?
I'm not sure.
It's next year's free agents. It's
Landry, it's next year's free agents.
Evans,
okay,
and Jayon Brown, I think, are the big three. Or I don't know if Jayon Brown counts if his contract voids or whatever the case may be. But
I was looking 2023, so that would have been the wrong year. Yeah.
Yeah. So one other point I want to get to before we look ahead to a Falcons offense without Julio Jones. Albert Breer had a report on Monday providing a little bit more context on, maybe why the relationship between Julio and the Falcons got to be where it is. And he had mentioned that it had a lot to do, or the final straw, I guess I should say, was the firing of Dan Quinn after the 0-5 start. And for me, that was very puzzling because on one hand, you got Julio Jones saying, hey, I want to go to a winner. Winning is the most important thing to me. And then on the other hand, he's saying he's disappointed that his head coach was fired after going 0-5, essentially, not winning. Aaron, I know you had some comments on Twitter today giving your rationale or explanation for that, and I kind of wanted to ask you and have you elaborate more. How does that make sense? Because to me, it's counterproductive in my mind to say that you want to go to a winner, but then you're disappointed when the team takes steps to try to win again and fire their head coach after an 0-5 start.
Well, no offense, Matt, but I think that's a very fan-oriented perspective on it. I think we look at it as, the team isn't winning because Dan Quinn's a bad coach. And I think you got to look at it, and the analogy I tried to use on Twitter was you got to think about it as if you have a job and your job has not been fun for the last year because of whatever reasons, and that going to your job has been taxing on you and draining on you emotionally, mentally, all these various things because in this analogy, the losing, and the only thing that makes it worthwhile for you to go to your job is, that supervisor, in this case, this analogy that, that's Dan Quinn, the head coach. It's at least fun to play for the team. And then the minute, someone comes in this case, Arthur Blank, and says, we're firing the supervisor, we're firing everybody, we're cleaning house, brand new management is coming in, and your job is no longer fun. It's one of those situations where you have a choice as a player, in Julio Jones's case, where it's like, look, I have an opportunity to change jobs and go to a place where it is fun to go to work, right? Even if whether he thinks Dan Quinn's the best coach or whatever the case may be, like, it's not really Julio's job to decide who's going to be the head coach of the team, right? It's his job to show up and go to work every day and do his job, which is be the best wide receiver on the planet. And if Dan Quinn's the last thing that allows him to want to show up to the building every day and do his job, whether you think Dan Quinn is a good coach or not, a good supervisor in this analogy, is really inconsequential. That's how Julio feels in this situation. So for me, the fact that he, quote unquote, wanted Dan Quinn to keep his job is not a indictment that says, oh, Julio doesn't want to win. It's just a situation where his scenario from his perspective is, this is the only thing that allows me to show up every day and do my job, or this is the main thing, and I don't want to go through this again. I only have a finite window of winning. Let's go to another place. And
again, it just seems counterintuitive, because you're saying he wasn't having fun at work because they're losing. Again, I'm not putting it all on Dan Quinn, but Dan Quinn, he is the head coach.
That's your perspective on it, because you're looking at it as Dan Quinn's the reason why the job sucks, and that's not what Julio's perspective.
No, I'm not saying that. I didn't say at all that Dan Quinn's the reason that Julio thought the job sucked.
It's not counterintuitive. If from Julio's perspective, Dan Quinn's the only reason why this job is worth me showing up every day.
Right. I think they aren't mutually exclusive. Like, he wants to win, but he also had a lot of love for Dan Quinn. I think that the two, just because they got fired, now he wants to go win. I don't think it was a causation thing. I think was what Aaron's trying to say.
Yeah, I think it's
one
more
didn't
the
cause the other.
Where it's like, this job sucks. I hate going to this job now.
Right.
And the only thing that was keeping me happy going to this job was this relationship I had with this one coach who I loved playing for. And when he's no longer gone, like, there's no point for me. And you hear all the other rumors where the talk of Julio being shopped also didn't sit well with him. So that's why I think the situation.
Again, I just can't get around the fact that the job sucks because they're losing, right? I mean, that's what you led with.
Yeah.
They were going to continue to lose, more likely, had they not made any changes. They had to make some changes. I think we all would agree with that, right?
Yeah. He understands the business, right?
Yeah.
Like, he knows that the changes are going to happen, but he's not. That doesn't, just because they make, like, I think the way I'm trying to present it is, he's unhappy. They make a change. It's not going to automatically make him happy.
Why is he unhappy? Because they're losing, right? They went 14-23 over the last 2+ years with Dan Quinn at the helm. If he wants to be unhappy, they start winning, right? They had to make that change to start winning. And again, it's a tough sell to a lot of people. And it's not just me, and it could be a fan perspective. And I like to bring both aspects to the table when we're talking about the Falcons. But again, I think it has more to do with this. And if anything, it's almost a cop-out to say that firing Dan Quinn's the last straw. I think, you kept him regardless. Again, I think this was much bigger. I think Arthur Blank hit their two relationships, and that's why, when Julio sent that farewell message on Instagram, that, again, it wasn't him, it was his representation probably. I think it's very notable that he didn't include Mr. Blank or the organization in that letter. I mean, how many times do you see farewell messages from players? They thank the organization, they thank the owner. That didn't happen. So for me, I think this was something we talked about a week or so ago. I think this has to do with Arthur Blank and obviously what took place in those negotiations. And, I don't really buy the Dan Quinn stuff, because while he went to bat for Dan Quinn, he stood up in the locker room for Dan Quinn. And I don't deny that he loved playing for Dan Quinn. Again, I think there was a much bigger problem at hand. But again, I don't know if we should beat a dead horse anymore. I mean, if anybody else, Jake, you want to add anything on that as far as
just real
Dan
quick?
Quinn
I will say that Julio was definitely not the only player that felt that way. I remember Keanu Neal was very upset the next day on Twitter. To paraphrase, he said something along the lines of, fans are so happy, like, y'all don't understand, or something along those lines. So obviously he wasn't the only guy that felt that way.
I'll also make a point that we're reading things from the outside looking in. We don't know the entire story. We're just getting fed these little bits of information, and we're trying to piece them together. Yeah, we're starting to get the whole picture about the behind the scenes. But I think that you alluded to it that I think it's bigger than Dan Quinn or winning or, having fun at work. I think it was, something like a Rodgers situation where Aaron Rodgers just feels slighted by the organization. And I think, those contract negotiations may have something happen where it just went wrong and it left a bad taste in Julio's mouth, I think. I mean, And then these little problems where they're not winning and Dan Quinn gets fired, then they start piling up and start to, manifest into him demanding a trade, basically.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. And I think we should leave it on that note. So let's talk a little bit about now the offense without Julio Jones. Obviously, I still think the cupboard is not completely barren without Julio Jones. I mean, you look at Calvin Ridley, who broke out once Julio went down with an injury in 2020. He's now ascended. He's a wide receiver 1 in this league. And there's many teams around the league that would kill to have a player that can step in like Calvin Ridley. You got Kyle Pitts, who, is a unicorn. We don't know how soon he's going to adapt to the NFL. Obviously, the sooner the better as they replace Julio. You got Russell Gage. You got Hayden Hurst. You got Olamide Zaccheaus, Tajay Sharp, Frank Darby, Jaden Graham, Lee Smith. That's how I would rank in that order the remaining pass catchers for Atlanta. Now, Aaron, you love disagreeing with me. Is that how your list would look as far as pass catchers now on the roster for Atlanta?
I'll be honest with you, Matt. I kind of zoned out when you started going down the depth chart. I didn't
All right, so let's
to
recap.
order.
Ridley 1, Pitts 2, Gage 3, Hurst 4, Zaccheaus 5, Sharp 6, Darby 7, and those two could be flip-flopped, honestly. Graham 8, and Lee Smith 9, who's honestly just going to function as a 6th offensive lineman.
That's fair. Yeah. I could nitpick it, but yeah, I'm not going to do that.
We'll do it. That's what we brought you on here for.
I mean,
the nitpick.
You kind of.
You would flip-flop Darby and Sharp? Is that the nitpick?
Yeah, I think Sharp is a better player than Darby, but I think Darby, because he got drafted, might get an edge there. But that's about the order I would go with.
And Jake, I liked what you said on Twitter about Darby. So I'll let you have the floor here. Tell us kind of what you're envisioning for him and maybe a potential comp of another 6th-round pick around the league.
Yeah, DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Obviously, Peoples-Jones was a 5-star recruit out of high school, but Jim Harbaugh just wasted him for 4 years. But I think he averaged like 20 yards a catch last year, and he only had a handful of catches, but he had some nice plays where he went and made some plays on some deep balls. Great athlete. I don't know if Darby's quite the athlete he is, but he has that ability to run past a DB and leave him behind. And I think he's a little more complete of a receiver than he gets credit for. There's not that much tape on him, but if there's a handful of clips of him taking a route short, turning and burning, getting upfield, and he can do all that stuff. He has nice hands. I like him a lot. I don't know if I'd put him ahead of O just yet. He's probably right behind Zaccheaus. But I'm also excited for Jaden Graham. I'll plug that real quick. Jaden Graham was grossly misused by Dirk Cutter. He averaged like 14 yards a catch as a rookie and then didn't even play at all last year.
Yeah, I think the thing with Darby, without Julio Jones, you're losing a big-time vertical threat, and that's what Darby brought in college at Arizona State. So, and you comped him to Donovan Peoples-Jones, which I think is great because that's kind of how the Browns used him in his rookie year as a big play threat. So while Sharp or Zaccheaus, might be the nominal starter as the 3rd receiver, in Sharp's case, probably the starting X, I think Darby mixes in a backup role in that same position and, looks to take the top off the defense or at least threaten the defense, which will allow Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts potentially some space underneath to operate. But let's talk overall picture. I was talking on Twitter, Aaron, you and I talked a little bit too, as far as what Julio's absence means, what, he would have meant to the offense. And I kind of framed it as, this offense could have been a 30-point per game juggernaut with him in the fold. And now with him out of the fold, I'm not as low. I think they bumped down to a 27-point per game unit still with the talent that they have. You look at what they did last year with Dirk Cutter, with Julio Jones, out of the lineup for most of the year, they ended up being a 25-point per game unit. And that was with a lot of red zone struggles. And it's been well documented that Arthur Smith, one of his strengths as a play caller, is in the red zone. I believe the Titans were top 3 in red zone conversion percentage, over 70% last year. So I think, it sort of balances it out in that standpoint. Alex, I'll turn it over to you first, and then we'll get Aaron's thoughts. How do you envision now, or what type of hit does not having Julio Jones do to the Falcons offense, from a points per game standpoint, just from an overall standpoint?
Obviously, nobody can replace Julio Jones. That needs to be said first and foremost. But, it's just a good position to kind of soften the blow of losing somebody like Julio Jones, because Arthur Smith loves his tight ends. I don't know how many times I've said in an article how often he uses 12 and 13 personnel. He last year the offense in Tennessee targeted tight ends at like 30% of the receptions were to tight ends, and that is undoubtedly with worse tight ends than are in Atlanta right now. Johnny Smith is a great piece, more after the catch kind of guy. But the tight ends that Atlanta has right now, and I was gonna say that I think Hayden Hurst could challenge Russell Gage for that third on the list in targets, just because of Matt Ryan. He's great in the middle of the field and intermediate passes. That's what Arthur Smith likes to draw up. We have Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst. I just think it kind of, the pieces are in place to soften the blow. 27 points per game is kind of rich, especially for a first-year unit. The talent is there. I think it all depends on how quickly Arthur Smith and Matt Ryan pick up on each other's nuances and everything like that, and how quickly the offense can get going, because in today's league, offenses do one thing to set up another. So, the quicker they can kind of get on the same page with each other, I think the quicker we'll see success. And it could be 27 points per game. That could be that success marker. I'm not going to define the success marker. That's hard to do, especially in a first-year offense. But I think it'll be undoubtedly better than last year, and I don't think it's going to be as noticeable that the team is without Julio Jones as it would be in any other offense, because they rely so much on the run game and on their tight ends.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it depends on how quickly they get out of the gates, because I think that's exactly it. That's the only thing that's potentially going to hold them back is the year one struggles that everyone likes to bring up with Matt Ryan and his play caller. So that's the question I want to turn to you, Aaron, as far as, can you see them having success early in year one and kind of bucking that trend that Matt Ryan, has had to overcome with each play caller that he's received?
It's possible. I don't know if I would be overly optimistic or overly confident that it will happen. Going back to your previous point of, I feel like losing Julio is more like going from a 30-point offense to like a 24-point offense. And 24 is a little closer to league average than necessarily 27, which is a little, typically, I guess, is like top 5, top 7 type of offense. So I think they have that potential. I think the positive things that you have to build on is he has a strong rapport in regards to Matt Ryan with Calvin Ridley. We saw late in the season his rapport really connect with Hayden Hurst. Obviously, we're expecting big things from Kyle Pitts. We know he's got a good connection with Russell Gage, and we've seen in games where Julio has not been present, him being able to find Olamide Zaccheaus. So they have the pieces to have success. For me, I guess the question is going to be the adaptability. Well, like for me, one of my big questions with Arthur Smith's offense is like Julio was the one piece that you could look at and say, this definitely is a piece that he had in Tennessee, and it's the A.J. Brown role. And we've seen Julio do exactly what A.J. Brown was asked to do in Tennessee and be very, very successful at doing it. And then the rest of the pieces that he had in Tennessee, Derrick Henry, while I like Mike Davis, I don't think he's going to be, that rock on the ground game that Henry was. Kyle Pitts is a different type of tight end than Jonnu Smith is, more vertical. Jonnu Smith is more of that sort of short guy that you can, throw the short stuff and let him cook after the catch, which is more a little bit what Hayden Hurst is. Russell Gage is obviously a little bit more of a slot receiver, more of a Adam Humphries type than a Corey Davis type. Calvin Ridley is I was going to say, I don't know. Calvin Ridley is better than Corey Davis. Let's say that. Calvin Ridley is very good. So I think really
I think without a doubt, he's better.
Yeah. I was trying to make a comparison, but it didn't quite work. But I think the question is going to be, how well does Arthur Smith adapt his offense, and based off of the relatively small sample size we've seen in 2 years, to the pieces here in Atlanta, because it's not going to be sort of, this piece, this round fit this round peg into this round hole from what we've seen. So I think the potential is there, but I think a lot of it leans on Kyle Pitts. I think the biggest difference that they're going to have in this offense without Julio Jones is the explosive capability. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big believer that explosiveness is your number one, number two, and number three priorities when it comes to offense. And the more explosive you are, the better your offense is going to be. And losing Julio Jones is a huge blow to the explosive capability. Ridley's an explosive player. Pitts is an explosive player. So it's not to sit here and say, as you say, that they don't have pieces there to make up that difference. But obviously, outside of those two, I don't know if you're really looking at these other players, whether we're talking about a Frank Darby, a Russell Gage, a Hayden Hurst, an Olamide Zaccheaus, guys that can show up consistently week in and week out like Julio Jones was. And I think that's going to be the big thing, where when you need an explosive play for, the last decade, the Falcons turn to Julio Jones to get them that play. And the question is going to be, how reliable are guys like Pitts and Ridley and the rest of the supporting cast going to be when the Falcons need to get those big chunk plays? Because, you can't just dink and dunk all day long, as we learned many, many times in the various dirt cutter errors, that is just not a successful strategy to being a consistent high-level offense in this league.
Well, I think, too, with the explosive plays, do you not think the scheme will create some of those, so it's not just relying on the individual talents to produce those?
That's one of the issues with the Arthur Smith offense, is it's not really an offense that's designed to push the ball down the field. A lot of their explosive plays in Tennessee was just throwing crossers to A.J. Brown and letting him cook after the catch. A lot of it was hand the ball off to Derrick Henry and let him do his thing. So it's not necessarily the scheme designing these things. It's more, just individual players making plays after the catch. It's a lot more yak and stuff. So I think the good thing about Arthur Smith's offense, which is very different from Dirk Cutter's offense, is it is designed to give those receivers more opportunities to get those yards after the catch, because you see more of those intermediate crossing routes in the offense, where Dirk Cutter was just allergic to those types of play calls. And is one of the reasons why guys, particularly the wide receiver group, did not get many yards after the catch. But I don't know, that to me is going to be a question, because I don't know if these guys are really the yak guys that, at least, you look at an A.J. Brown or Julio Jones is. Obviously, I'm not trying to diminish their ability after the catch, but it remains to be seen if you can really, really rely on that consistently, if you're just going to run intermediate crossers like he did in Tennessee, and that's going to be able to produce the results in Atlanta like you had in Tennessee.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I try not to box bright coaches. Like, if it was Dirk Cutter, sure, box him into what he's done is what he is. But I think Arthur Smith used his personnel in Tennessee and used their strengths. Jonnu Smith was a yak guy, so he used Jonnu Smith in that way. Like you said, they might not have those types of players in Atlanta. So I'm hoping, and it's something that they've preached, it's something Dean Pease has preached on his defense, that they're going to put the guys in position to let their strengths flourish. So we'll see how much of what he did in Tennessee translates. We talked about, you mentioned they don't have a Derrick Henry, so he's going to have to adapt the running game to a Mike Davis or to, the guys that they have behind him. So again, I'm trying not to box Arthur Smith into what he did in Tennessee, because, one of the things with the two tight end sets that we talked about a lot was that they would run out of those tight end sets. Well, in Atlanta, Hurst and Pitts, they're not looked at for their blocking ability. They're looked at for what they do in the pass game. So my hope, my expectation is, in the two tight end sets, it's not just going to be to run the football out of like he did in Tennessee. It's going to be to exploit the base personnel that defenses might have to keep on the field to defend that. And then, that leads to opportunities and creates conflict, like Arthur Smith, like I've talked about many times on the show here, likes to do on offense. So we'll see what happens. It's certainly important to note the tendencies that he has used in Tennessee and how much that does carry over and translate. But again, with a bright offensive mind like Arthur Smith, I'm trying not to box him in to what he did in the past. Jake, you want to add anything before we move on to one of your favorite segments of our show?
It's like y'all said, you got Jimmys and Joes and you got X's and O's, and the Falcons are going to need some Joes this year. I do think Russell Gage will break 1,000 receiving yards this year, but I think a lot of that's going to be volume. So, I mean, it's not like I'm saying he's going to come out and be a Pro Bowler, but I do think he passes. I think he passes the 1,000-yard mark.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I mean, it would be very reminiscent of, I believe, that 2013 year when Harry Douglas did it. I certainly think Russell Gage can step up. I know Aaron, I smiled when he brought up the slot receiver aspect. I'm curious to see if we see more Russell Gage out wide as an X or a Z receiver. I think certainly with Julio Jones out of the fold, that's got to be explored. I mean, they did bring in Tajay Sharp, who profiles there, and Frank Darby, but I think you're going to see some more Russell Gage there, and hopefully he proves me right. But yeah, the favorite segment that I alluded to of Jake's, it's Just Stop Tweeting. I think we debuted it a couple of weeks ago. It's a Sports Talk ATL original, back from their old podcasting days, where we pick a tweet from Twitter that just doesn't make any sense. And this week's nominee came from Marcus Mosher. And I quote, "I wonder now if the Falcons regret passing on CeeDee Lamb for AJ Terrell." And, I'll start, but for me, has he looked at the cornerback depth chart in Atlanta? Because AJ Terrell, and this is the point I made on Twitter, I mean, he's the only thing that's keeping me from vomiting about looking at the Falcons cornerback room. They brought in some guys. They still have Isaiah Oliver, who might have found a home at nickel cornerback, but even if he does show competent play, I don't know if the Falcons are going to retain him long term. So for me, I think this is just, and Marcus does great work, but this is just him being a prisoner of his old takes and doesn't want to, admit that AJ Terrell was a good pick, was arguably the best rookie cornerback in his draft class over the likes of Jeff Okudah and CJ Henderson, who went before him. But for me, no. Falcons, as we kind of went through, they're okay at pass catcher. They're more than okay at pass catcher. Again, a lot of teams would love to have a Calvin Ridley, a Kyle Pitts, even Russell Gage and Hayden Hurst are great third and fourth options on a lot of teams. So that's my take on the situation. Alex, what are your thoughts? I mean, do you think the Falcons messed up last year?
No. Well, it's always 2020. Everyone always says that. It's really easy to be like, oh, well, obviously they should have done that. I think that annoys me more than anything when somebody goes, oh, they should have drafted. Well, no shit, they should have drafted them. Like, we see 4 years from now, the guy's an all-pro and that guy's a bum. Like, we get it. But directly referencing to this, I mean, who else were you going to be? So it would be, Kyle. Basically, we get like Kyle Pitts and AJ Terrell, or CeeDee Lamb and Patrick Surtain, or JC Horn, and from this year's draft cornerbacks, saying if Falcons went wide receiver and then went cornerback this draft, like, who would you rather have? I mean, yeah, we don't know what JC Horn or Patrick Surtain could be, but we know AJ Terrell came into his own at the end of the year. And I feel very confident in saying that CeeDee Lamb will never have the type of impact on a game like Kyle Pitts will. I mean, how Aaron was talking about these explosive plays, I believe Kyle Pitts will be that type of player that you can drag him across the field and he can beat a safety in a foot race. He beat corners in foot races in college. Like, he beat Kelvin Joseph, who he's from Kentucky. I don't know where he went. I think he went to Dallas, maybe.
Dallas in the second round, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he beat him in a foot race, and he's not a slow guy. So I think that take is lazy, and he's just trying to get a rile up out of a sensitive and vulnerable Falcons fan base, and he got exactly that. I mean, we're talking about him on our show, so good for him.
Aaron, what are your thoughts? Do you think the Falcons should have taken CeeDee Lamb last year, or did they, in hindsight, do the right move still?
No, I think they made the right move. When it comes to the wide receiver position versus the cornerback position, it's hard to find value at cornerback after the first 50 or so picks, as the Cowboys are finding out right now because their secondary is terrible, and it's much easier to find value at the wide receiver position. So you can certainly criticize the Falcons for not addressing their wide receiver depth for several years until they drafted Frank Darby, because they were insistent on drafting return specialists for many, many years. But taking CeeDee Lamb was not the mistake in terms of that go. But I'll give some love to Marcus Mosher, host of Locked On Cowboys. So he's a co-worker. So I'm not going to go too hard on Marcus, but it's a take that the Cowboys fans. This is what happens with fans, right? Like, you think that your team's pick is the greatest pick in the history of the world until it's not, and then you hate the player. And then you make fun of every other team, right? Because Cowboys fans oh, they allowed us to get a top 10 talent like CeeDee Lamb if they had only taken that guy. And so, of course, Cowboys fans are going to die on that hill that CeeDee Lamb is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And Falcon fans are going to sit here and say, no, AJ Terrell's great. And we know Dallas has no problem scoring points, but they can't stop nobody. And now I guess, the Falcons have historically had that issue. And so we'll see if that flip-flops at some point in the near future, where we actually can say that the Falcons have legitimately a good defense led by AJ Terrell. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not going to hold my breath on that. It's been so long. But I just think it is what it is. Marcus is going to keep dying on this hill until we get to a point 7 years from now where AJ Terrell's been to 5 Pro Bowls and CeeDee Lamb's only been to 2 or something like that. And then he'll be like, oh, I guess we maybe should have taken AJ Terrell or something.
Jake, I'll let you close the segment off. What are your thoughts?
It's what Aaron said. I can't knock it. He's putting a little food in the Cowboys fans' dish and rubbing their belly. That's what beat reporters do. My problem is when it's at my expense, damn it, I'm going to talk about it. So my thing is, I'll never miss an opportunity to jab Thomas Dimitroff in the ribs. I'll never miss it. You talk about return specialists. We talk about the legend Marcus Green himself. I like to get on him, but I mean, let's talk about the conversation we would have been having the day after the draft if the Falcons did take CeeDee Lamb. Oh, they have no defense. They just cut Trufant. They have no cornerbacks. So-and-so is on the board. Kayvon Chason was on the – I think Kayvon Chason was on the board. I don't remember that far back.
Yeah.
The so-and-so was on the board, and they would have gotten killed. Oh, how could you take a wide receiver? You already have Calvin Ridley. You already have Julio Jones. Hindsight, it's 2020. They don't have a crystal ball. And A.J. Terrell's a good player. So that's just why the take was really weird for me. Until those last 3 or 4 weeks when he was going against Kansas City and Tampa Bay twice, and, he was just on an island for most of the part. That's hard for a rookie. That's one of the hardest things with a rookie cornerback. If you're the only one there that's really putting up numbers, you're going to get targeted a lot. And that's just the way it goes. I will say I'm perfectly happy with A.J. Terrell. I didn't really like the pick at the time, actually. I wanted Kayvon Chason, and I was dead wrong about that, which I'm fine admitting. But I just thought it was a weird, just a weird spot to pick. Also, CeeDee Lamb, I'm not discrediting him. He's a really great player, but he gets covered by third cornerbacks because Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper are on the team. So I'm just saying I'm fine with the Terrell pick. I just thought it was a weird tweet. I figured we'd talk about it. I thought it was funny.
All right, so let's get into, obviously, the cause was not the salary cap, but an effect of trading Julio Jones. It did lead to $15 million plus in savings. Aaron and I both calculated after the Falcons signed their draft class and, you add the replacement level contract for the top 51 cap space. Falcons are going to have about $8.5 million in cap space to potentially, make 1 or 2 small little splashes in free agency. So I thought, now would be a great time to run through some guys we have our eyes on. I think position groups that are worth paying attention to is edge rusher, interior offensive line, obviously secondary, as we just kind of got done saying, other than AJ Terrell. At cornerback, there's not a lot to feel confident about. So, Aaron, I'll start with you. If there's one player or maybe one position you'd hope that the Falcons would look at, who would that be? If
it was one position, I would want a left guard, but the pickings are very slim right now. There's like nobody that's a good veteran. I mean, Kelechi Osemele is probably the only guy out there, but he's got 2 injured knees or whatever at age 33 or whatever.
How do you feel about Trey Turner?
I like Trey Turner as a player, but I just don't think he's a good scheme fit. I just think he's a bad scheme fit. And he also has his injury concerns as well. So for me, like if we're gonna get the most bang for our buck, I just like get a pass rusher, go out there and sign Melvin Ingram, go out there and sign Justin Houston, come in and be sort of what Cam Wake was for the Titans in 2019 as that sort of situational edge rusher, so that we're not in a situation where we're relying on Barkevious Mingo and John Kaminsky and whoever else, Jacob Tuohy Mariner, to have to be the fourth guy alongside Grady Jarrett, Marlon Davidson, and Dante Fowler. So that would be, for me, the one move that would, I'm not going to sit here and say that's going to magically be the last piece to the puzzle on defense, but at least would give me a little bit more confidence that this new regime, particularly when you compare to the stink I made last offseason when the Falcons went out and got Charles Harris instead of going out and getting a veteran pass rusher, I'd be like, hey, I've been reluctant to heap too much praise on Terry Fontenot's lap in terms of his offseason moves, but if he actually did that and got a legit veteran pass rusher when Thomas Dimitroff refused to do that for years and years and years, I'll be like, hey, Terry Fontenot, you already got a thumbs up in my book. So, yeah, that's where I would be at.
Alex, are you also on the edge rush bandwagon, or how would you spend the Falcons' last free agent bucks?
So, to a certain extent, yes, but just for the sake of the show, no. I'll just disagree. That I hope Pease can take these little foot soldiers and scheme them into some sacks, because I don't really know how many people are going to be winning one-on-ones. So with that hope, I looked at somebody like Dre Kirkpatrick, who is strictly just boundary depth, but that's what the Falcons need. Like, I saw somebody tweet the other day about Isaiah Oliver on the boundary. Like, that's not going to happen, and if it does, it's not good. Like, that is not good for the Falcons. I hope Fabian Moreau can, take that boundary spot out opposite Terrell, but I don't. You can't be confident really in him because of what little he's shown. So Dre Kirkpatrick could come in and at least give you some veteran depth. And he played last year on like a $1 million deal in Arizona, I think. So he might qualify for the veteran minimum. And, that's always good for the Falcons. And I know we just created some money, but I think we should roll over a lot of this excess money instead of spending it on these guys that we're talking about personally. But probably cornerback.
Jake, what do you say about free agent acquisitions?
Speaking of Arizona, I would have taken Darqueze Dennard back in a heartbeat, but that's not an option anymore.
Yeah, same.
Just for the sake of parity, I've been on this train since probably January. I still want Malik Hooker. I still want him on a 1-year deal. I don't know if he signed today. He was taking a bunch of visits. He's 24, I think. Maybe 26. If he stays healthy, he's a very good player. Breyer, he's a nickel corner. I don't know if he would want to come back. Steven Nelson is another guy that gets thrown around. And if you decide you want to build some depth on the defensive front, Jarrell Casey, as long as there are no hard feelings there, which he definitely had some hard feelings towards the Titans, but I don't think Arthur Smith was on the offensive side and Dean Pease was retired at that point. But Geno Atkins is a bit of a wonky fit, but the Bengals ran some 3-down fronts last year. There's a couple guys you could add, but I'm with Alex. I don't know if I would roll it over. I'm a big Justin Houston guy. He had 8 sacks last year. But I think they will roll it over. I think that's what's going to end up happening.
Yeah, I think, the names that get me the most excited are Houston and Ingram. I just don't know if what they're going to have to spend, which is probably $3 to $4 million tops, is going to be enough to lure one of those guys. I think, more likely maybe a Nick Easton at like $1 million or $2 million could be that veteran left guard swing center, even though they don't really need a third center at this point, is the name. And there's some connection with Fontenot in New Orleans. So that would be a name that I think could happen. I'm with Jake too. I've long wanted Malik Hooker all this offseason. I kind of gave up on that dream. It seems like he's starting to visit some more teams. I don't know if the Falcons will be interested given what they've already done at safety, but I think they should be, because when healthy, Malik Hooker is a ball hawk, and he's got that range that you would want. If Dean Pease was going to play some single high and mix it up a bit, but yeah, I wouldn't get my hopes up too much. Again, they're not going to have, even though we said they have $8.5 million, you got to keep in mind that's just top 51 cap space. They're going to have to fill out a full 53-man roster, and then also they got to add the practice squad to that, which is another couple million. So, and then you got the emergency fund of $4 million. So when you factor all that in there, Falcons aren't going to have a whole lot to spend now. Yes, they could get aggressive. They still have a Grady Jarrett restructure in their back pocket if they wanted to. But at this point, after the way the offseason's been, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. And they'll just look to potentially extend Grady next offseason. But we'll see what happens. If they could get one of those pass rushers, though, I mean, that would be a huge win. And you've got to kind of factor that in, I think, when you're looking at the totality of the Julio trade. You would have to say, hey, we got Justin Houston or Melvin Ingram because of it. So that'll soften the blow as well. But almost nearing the end of the show, but before we officially turn the page and close the book on the Julio Jones era, I thought there's really no better way to do it than to kind of honor him and maybe talk a little bit about a couple of our favorite moments from him in his 10 years in Atlanta. So Aaron, as our special guest tonight, I'll let you go first. Give us a couple of your favorite moments of Julio Jones as an Atlanta Falcon.
Well, it's so hard to narrow it down to a couple, but one that stands out to me is the NFC Championship game back in 2012, that first quarter he had that was like single-handedly the only reason why the Falcons had a chance to beat the 49ers, because the 49ers were like 10 times better a football team than him. And I was like in the building and watching Julio just cook that secondary in that first quarter before he got hurt was incredible. And that was really like his coming out party. And then you saw that continue the next couple of years. And I'm trying to think of what game was it? The second half against Dallas in 2015, where the Falcons were down early. And then Kyle Shanahan was just like, look, I'm handing the ball off to Devontae Freeman. I'm throwing it to Julio every single snap. And I think Julio put up like 150 yards in that second half and helped guide the Falcons back. The second half against the Packers in 2014, where the Falcons were like getting blown out on Monday night or Sunday night or wherever it was on primetime, like 34-3 at halftime. And I got very drunk for that game at halftime. And I just remember watching Julio just go off in the second half of the game. And it was, partially due to the level of intoxication I had, but it was definitely one of the better hour and a halves of my life of watching Julio almost single-handedly put the team on his back and lead that team back from like a 30-point deficit and get it within like one score going into like the final minutes of that game. So those are some of the more earlier memories. Obviously, there's 1,000 that you could go through, and I'm sure you guys will be able to rattle off several more. Yeah,
I mean, those are definitely a couple that I had on my list. That 2012 one also holds a special place in my heart. I was in the building for that as well, and I really do think that was his coming out party. That was when he kind of, announced his presence to the NFL world and kind of took over as the wide receiver one in Atlanta. And, he held that pole, that position for the next 7 to 8 years. But Jake, let you do you want any others that Aaron didn't mention that you want to include?
I'll try not to hog them all. Definitely, because I think I'm going to go to the well. I'm going to go to the easy ones. The greatest catch in Super Bowl history, in my opinion. That doesn't matter. I'll probably never be as happy as I was in that moment ever again. So unless the Falcons want to win one within like the next 5, but definitely spoiling Carolina's perfect season was up there too. I mean, he tortured the Panthers. I'm sure they're the happiest team in the NFL. They're probably happier than the Titans.
Alex, you're not a Falcons fan, you're a Packers fan, but as an outsider,
I was about to say, Aaron,
you
don't know, but
include any of the Packers ones on your list. But which ones stand out to you from Julio's great 10-year run in Atlanta?
So I decided to be a good sport about it, and I mentioned the 2014 game. He had like 250 yards, 260 yards.
Yeah.
Packers did win that game, I might add, but he seriously almost won the game, like for the Falcons single-handedly. But the one that is just so crushing is the 2016 playoff game against the Packers. He rattled off like 190 and 2 touchdowns or something like that. I was in the building wearing my Aaron Rodgers jersey. I mean, just getting shit on. I mean, just that was the year y'all were, destined. The Packers had 3 practice squad guys trying to follow Julio Jones. I mean, there's that one play where he stiff arms Demarius Randall like to a blue. I mean, I was being a good sport about these, but these were like some of the lowest moments of my life. I mean, watching Julio Jones do this to my team, and I'm sure a lot of people have these stories from the other side where they've just been, somebody guard Julio Jones, and I wish it was that easy, but like clearly it's not. Yeah, I was on the other side of this for sure.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we don't have to be on the other side of it. I'm trying to think when are the Falcons going to be scheduled to play the Titans? Is it?
I think it's
we played the preseason. Yeah, but doubt he plays.
Well, doubt he plays. So yeah, hopefully Julio's
Regular
career
season 2023.
2023. Okay, so that'll be his last year in Tennessee. But
do you guys
hopefully
think
we don't
he's
have
going to ask for a contract extension or like an adjustment or something after this year? I've been wanting to ask this.
If he balls
That
out,
would be-
yeah, probably.
That
yeah,
would be
probably
hilarious.
because he'd be getting paid $11 million per year at that point if he comes off of like a 1,200, 1,300 yard season.
That's that one last chance to get a bite of that apple if you're going to be 32-33.
Even Rappaport said today on Rich Eisen that he hasn't heard that he's going to ask for that, but like knowing Julio, like why not?
Yeah.
If you can get it, get it. You know.
I think so too.
Yeah, I would put my money on it that if he has a great season in 2021 here, that he would. But you guys mentioned a lot of good ones. I'll just throw out the other ones that I had on my list. Start with the rookie year. That catch against the Colts, that kind of, told me right there that the impossible is possible with Julio Jones. I still don't know how he caught that. The ball was fluttering up there for forever. And, on instant replay, it looked like it hit the ground, but for him to just get his body underneath it and flip the hips like he did was just incredible. And again, that was kind of his rookie moment there that kind of set him on this path that he is today. One of the other ones was when he sunned Patrick Peterson. Those two go way back to LSU versus Bama days, and Peterson talked some junk leading up to the game, and Julio kind of just let his game do the talking. And, he went off for 12 catches and 180 yards and a couple scores. I believe it was 20.
You're really giving it to Alex this episode.
Yeah, I'm just getting shit on over here.
Hey, it's Julio Jones giving it to you. I'm just kind of, we're taking a stroll down memory lane with it. So the other one, we didn't mention. Well, I guess Jake, you mentioned it as far as spoiling that undefeated season. But yeah, I mean that's an iconic moment, marquee moment. Him skying over Luke Kuechly and doing his jet celebration in the end zone. I'll never forget that moment. And then lastly, I don't think we touched on his third of 3 250 plus games. Again, there's only. He's the only other receiver with more than one such game. He has 3 of them, and the one against the Bucs in 2017 I thought was memorable. One because of the 12 gauge play, Mohamed Sanu throw and catch to Julio. My eyes popped out of my head when I saw that because again, prior to that point, all we saw from the 12 gauge was Mohamed Sanu running the read option. So to see him drop back to throw and throw a beautiful dime to Julio in the end zone was special. So, again, a lot of great moments. We left some out, obviously, but those are definitely the big ones. And, it'll be tough not having him because, again, he's meant so much to, the team, the organization, the community. It stinks the way it ended. It stinks the relationship became fractured, but it happens. And, again, it is a business, and sometimes business gets in the way of the football. But again, I think I speak for all of us. We thank Julio for, his contributions, and, without him, some of these great playoff runs would have never happened. So again, appreciate everyone tuning in. That's going to conclude our show. Before we get out of here, Aaron, again, appreciate you coming on. Let the people know what you got coming up over on Locked On Falcons.
Yeah, people can check me out on Twitter at FalcFans. They can check out my daily podcast 5 days a week, Monday through Friday on Locked On Falcons, although probably as we get further along this month, it might go back to 3 days a week before training camp, but we'll see about that. Probably as most people are listening to this on Thursday, talking about the defense and what the Falcons under Dean Pease are going to do. Still have most of the day 3 draft picks on their scatter reports to do. Taquan Graham should be out Friday, if not Monday, and then hopefully I'll be able to wrap up the rest of those guys over the next week or two, and people can get my thoughts on Frank Darby and how he can potentially fill the shoes of Julio Jones at some point in the next week or two. So that's what's in store.
Guys, anything you want to plug over at Sports Talk ATL?
Buy some merch. Yep, right there.
Follow me
on Instagram. Thanks, Aaron, for coming on the show. It was great.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of weird that this is the first time I've met you because I've seen you on Twitter forever, and I guess I didn't technically meet you, but
but yeah, really appreciate it, Aaron. It's good to be back chopping it up like old days. So again, thanks for listening, everyone. Make sure you rate, subscribe, comment, do all that fun stuff. We really appreciate it. So for Aaron Freeman, Jay Gordon, Alex Lord, I'm Matt Karoly. We're talking birdie. Go Falcons.